We're here tonight basically as part of BBC Story Finders. This building is a great story to tell, and indeed we've told it many, many times to hundreds and hundreds, maybe thousands of people. We do tours here almost every month of every year since we took over.
Now, my eldest son Lee was born in maternity ward in May 1971. And in those days you had to stay sort of in for 5 days. You had a good long rest before you went home with a new baby. Not these days, they chuck you out in sort of 24 hours. But in the middle of that week that I was there, we had an inspection on the maternity ward by Maternity. Now, I didn't know her name, but I'm reliably told in 71 it was Miss Long. Is that right? Miss Long? Not Miss Long? Who are you there? So who was 1971? Miss Street? Miss Green. Right. Miss Green, right. So the maternity ward had doors, French doors opening out into the garden. It was May. It was a gorgeous May. And the nurses had been, not just the nurses, everybody had been busy cleaning. And we were told to stay in our beds. And we were practically strapped into them with no creases on those sheets and told gently to not get out and stay there till matron had gone past. That was okay. In she came, flanked obviously by his sister and whoever else it was. And there was a wee slight breeze. And this wee breeze just came in off the garden and balls of fluff floated off the top of the curtains, the curtain rails, and rolled up and landed at her feet. And she just went, and the nurses rolled their eyes to heaven. And she turned around and walked straight back out. So I guess they ended up on the clean darn thing. But that was my memories of that particular 1971.
1978, I was on carrying operation. Master Romley operated on me. But right down the town. A man, Mr. John Baldwin, on Hall Street. I was out for gallstones or some operation of that day. It was very much pain, but the next day he improved. He was anxious about selling sheep. And he asked Mr. Romley, can I get out to sell the sheep? And he said, if you're well enough, you can get out. So Mr. Romley then went out to sell the sheep. And a day or so he'd come back in again, and back on the bed again.
I remember this coming into the theatre, and there was one door led off to the nurse's home, or the nurse's dining area. The one that was through, as you go straight through the door, was the kitchen, where they did the cooking. This here has changed since I was here. This was all glass, and this was I would say it was from here across, was the theatre. And Mr. Romley's case notes were read in here. The sterilising room was here, that led on to the theatre. That's the only thing that I remember. There was a door that took us through into the X-ray room. I presume it's still there yet. I was a ward orderly. And I think I spoke of Mr. Romley tonight as being one of the greatest. I remember I'd never seen too many come to the ward to lift up, off, and help with his, after his operation, to leave his patient back in the bed again. That was one of the famous ones that he had, and was never scared to take part at the bedside and doing anything. That's what made him a great. And I just had spoken there tonight. I think he should have been knighted for his great legend that he has put up here.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
We had, for example, one night, you remember, those of you that still work here, Rose, you remember the old bus that always used to sit there before we took the road away?
That's right.
Well, just when we were moving the builders in here, The road was still there, and it had been snowing for about 2 weeks, and then it had started to thaw and massive frost came down. So the place was like a bottle, and there was wild, strong winds. When I got a phone call about 3:30 in the morning from one of the security men, he had been coming walking across the road, and this is true. All of a sudden, the bus just, there was no one in it. It was 3 o'clock in the morning. The bus came careering across the path, blocking his way. And in his mind, it was the ghosts telling him that they didn't want us anywhere near their building. He was panting, and I said, "God, it's really got to you. You sound really, are you okay?" He says, "All right, I've just stopped around." I says, "Where are you?" He says, "I'm outside the house." I said, "For Christ's sake, you only live over in Spurn Road. What are you doing in the house?" He just ran in whatever direction he was facing at the time. Now, he believes that, I think, the wind, because the road was icy, the wind blew the bus around. But they regularly heard and still hear crying children. And I know that's the maternity ward, but there's a couple of explanations for it apparently. We used to have a desk out there just in that foyer for about a year, and they regularly heard crying children down that corridor. Now, I know that was the maternity ward, but there was a story that emerged, and I don't know, a lot of people have heard it, I don't know if many of you have heard it, of a nurse, probably in the workhouse days, who got pregnant, as you know, not a good thing in those days. She wasn't married, and she managed to hide the pregnancy under her uniform, which tells us it must have been a long time ago because it was a big enough uniform. And I know some people remember hearing this story in the 40s that she delivered the child herself and then strangled it, and then, racked with remorse, shortly after hung herself. I don't know if you heard Mr. Romney's story about the Robertson children who lived in the big grand house down at the road, what do you call it, Dogleat House, but yet their mother brought them down here every Christmas to spend their pocket money on. You heard that, and I think that's a lovely thing, especially this time of year. But another story we heard regularly was from some nurses that when somebody died in the hospital, and this is relatively recently, maybe not the 80s, it seemed to be mostly around the 60s I heard the stories, but that no matter where the person dies, a regular sight was the ghost of a woman, who some people say was Dr. Robertson, coming walking from what was the old laundry over there towards the dead person, the notion being that she was coming to bring them to a better place. And indeed, someone who I think maybe in this room told a story of how her mother and father were waiting on their mother, her grandmother, as it were. She was due to die during the night, if you like, and they had fallen asleep, and the mother had woken up in the middle of the night, or she explained to them when they woke up that her bedclothes or whatever had come off her shoulder, and she felt a pair of hands pulling the blankets back up over her again.
I was at college in Belfast. My mother was in hospital here, so I had to come down by train every Friday evening, and then walk up from the railway station, you see up there, and come in. And as I came past, the door was always slightly open, just inside the front door, where that was Matron's office. And she'd stick her head out and she'd say, "That you, Florence?" So I say yes, and said, "I'll be up in a minute." And I'd go on into the ward where my mother was. And the next thing was that the door would open, and there was Matron with a pint mug of tea, yes, not anything else, and a huge big pile of scones. And because she knew that I had nothing, to eat to get the train home. And that was every time for weeks. She did that every Friday night for me. And it was always she herself and coming out of the kitchen across there and made the tea and fixed the scones and brought them upstairs to me. And that is one of the memories that was typical of the Roe Valley. It was a kind of that humanity. Nowadays, you might come into someone's hospital and not have a meal for a week, and nobody would care. But so that was that to me is it's just the compassion and the care for people.
Mr. Romney did a lot of marvellous work here in this hospital for lots of people. One particular invalid fellow from outside the town area here who had a car accident, and at that time we didn't have profile beds or ripple mattresses, to turn the patient or to help prevent pressure sores. Mr. Romney made a hammock, helped with Willie Mitchell, made a hammock for this man, suspended him up off the bed so that he didn't give any pressure sores. No, so he did marvellous work really with, you know, what he hadn't got, just equipment with him and Willie Mitchell. It was unbelievable.
So they just fashioned what they could just to get the man comfortable.
Fashioned what they could, yeah.
I mean, that's really quite, you know.
There was another young girl from outside the town as well who had MS, and again, problems with pressure sore were starting to arise, and he made a plaster cast. She lay on her mouth and nose on this plaster cast until the end of her time. She died quite young. Sure, nothing was a problem, yes. And anything that, you know, anything that he could conduct or anything that he could make, Willie Mitchell and him were a pair together. They were no problem.
We had blue dress and white apron, and a hard belt and cuffs, and then went white dresses. And then we went white dresses with no hats. No hat. Wee hat. Small hat. And then we had pink dresses with pink belts and no hats. And then went for trousers and tunics. Navy trousers and tunics. And blue tunics.
And what did you think was the best?
Well, the blue dresses with white aprons, I thought.
Was very professional, and your hat
That's what you think on, that's what you think of yours, the blue note. That's what I would think on.
Everything was perfectly safe. The only vehicles was the ambulance. They actually had two, and one private body forward that originally was the ambulance, but then it was used for fever patients, the hospital for that. And the only other traffic were the doctor's cars, two Dr. Jones, Dr. Atchison and Dr. Reed, so that there was safety from vehicles all around here. The milk was delivered by horse, the bread was delivered by horse, the undertaker came with a horse in here, so that all these were provided for during that time. I don't know if I'm right to say this, but one of the things during the war, they had to have some plan if there was going to be an area. And the plan that was for our family, because of the size of this building and its location in town, we were to make our way up the railway line and out to across the Donald. I think that was Mrs. Scott was the cook in the kitchen here, and she lived out. That was a house that was felt safer because it was away from the built-up area. There were airplanes over because as we walked up the railway line and then made our way out to that place, you could see the clear moonlit night. You could see everything. And we got out, and Mrs. Scott, she was baking, and she made something to eat. And eventually we all walked home again. Many years later, when I met the young lady, and we were talking, and at some stage we started, I was talking to her mother, and we started talking about birthdays and one thing and another, and then it transpired into the night that we walked up the railway line. Anne was born here in the maternity department in Boston. There are probably a few other stories, but I think that's enough for now.
And you didn't say if you walked up the line and one sock on and one sock off.
That wasn't me on the sign.
When I lived in the town, I had a few experiences in the old, I think these days they call it A&E departments. Back then it was known as the casualty department. And there's one nurse who, she stands out in my memory, I don't know if anybody else remembers, Nurse Wallace. She became Sister Wallace. As a wee lad of, I think it was about 7 years old, I was helping the council workmen, which ironically sort of became my career, as it were. In the early spring of 1967, a flagstone fell on my foot and was rushed down here to the hospital. And it was Nurse Wallace who tended to me. I think it was one of those really sticky, stretchy bandages they put on in those days to try and get the bone to set when it's broken toe. Several years later, took up nerve operation, and I was grass tracking in Portrush, and I came off and broke my collarbone quite badly. I was in rushed to Korean hospital, but after that I came around here. They have the old figurehead bandage adjusted and replaced. I walked in, the first person I saw was the very same Sister Wallace, and she looked at me and she said, "Not you again." And she's like, 11 years later, I just couldn't believe it was like, a promotion and you go out and come back in again. I was on the receiving end of Mr. Romney's knife as a 20-year-old, and at that time, when he saw my name, the first thing he said was, "Are you a relation of Mrs. Geller, who works in medical records, which is my mother beside me?" And I said, "Yes, that's my mother." And he said, "Well, in that case, I'll have to go extra special care for him." It was a minor operation to remove the cyst from the side of my neck. I just discovered the joys of shaving with an electric razor, which didn't agree with me. So I had to have the cyst removed. And I remember walking out of the hospital thinking, well, I've been looked after by a very eminent surgeon, and the time I got to the old railway bridge, the effects of anaesthetic wore off, and I sat down and the pain kicked in, and it was just like pain I'd never experienced before. But I can honestly say, all the time that I came to this hospital, like I said to you earlier, there's no such thing as MRSA in the Roe Valley Hospital, because the standard of cleanliness, the standard of everyone about the place, the staff, and the people in it, second to none. I've been in England for the last 16 years, been in different hospitals over there, and still there's no one can compare to the Roe Valley Hospital.